We need to talk. Those 4 words from Nathan's lips detonated the bomb that would obliterate my life as I knew it. I stared at him, dread creeping up my spine, as he scrolled through his phone with an expression I couldn't read. I found these messages between you and Kira. He turned the screen to face me, and there it was. The undeniable proof of his infidelity glaring back at me. It's been going on for over a year. She's pregnant, Marla. We're starting a new life together. The words hung in the air like a noxious gas, choking me. I wanted to cry, to scream, to run, but I could only gape as decades of marriage crumbled around me. Well? Nathan snapped. Say something. My chest tightened as anger sliced through the paralysis. You son of a bitch, I growled through clenched teeth. After everything we've been through? After 23 years of building a family? It's not like that, he protested. I never meant to hurt you. Kira and I just clicked. She understands me in a way you never could. Fire blazed in my eyes. Oh, I understand you perfectly now. You're a liar, a cheater, and a disgrace. Nathan recoiled as if struck. Give me a break, Marla. You've been so wrapped up with your parents, I felt neglected. This is as much your fault as mine. I shot to my feet, fury propelling me. My fault? I've supported us for years while you chased one get-rich scheme after another. Don't you dare try to blame me for your lack of character. He opened his mouth, but I cut him off, grabbing my purse and keys. Save it. I want a divorce, and I'm taking you for everything you're worth. Without waiting for a response, I stormed out, the sudden silence giving no comfort. My hands shook as I fumbled with the car keys, tears I'd refused to shed burning my eyes. How could this be happening? After so many years, so many struggles we'd faced together, Nathan had thrown it all away for a fling with a woman young enough to be his daughter. Worse, he'd compounded that betrayal by impregnating her. White-hot anger lanced through me, hardening my resolve. I wouldn't be the wounded, weeping wife history discarded as a footnote. Nathan would regret the day he ever looked at another woman. This was just the opening salvo in a war he had no idea was coming. And by the time I was done, he'd be broken and begging for scraps of the life he'd so casually discarded. My fingers tightened around the steering wheel as I pulled onto the road. There would be no more tears, only the cold, brutal satisfaction of watching Nathan's world burn. This can't be happening. I stared at the pile of boxes and furniture crammed into the dingy one-bedroom apartment, a far cry from the beautiful home Nathan and I had shared. The divorce had been messy, but in the end, the judge awarded me this place, along with custody of our parents. Need any help, dear? I turned to see Mom, her brow creased with confusion. Even in her early stage of Alzheimer's, she could sense the upheaval. Forcing a smile, I took her hand. It's all right, Mom. Just moving into a new place. The lie felt like acid on my tongue. I hated deceiving her, but the full truth would only cause her more anguish. Better she remained blissfully unaware of Nathan's ultimate betrayal. Marla? Dad's voice, already strained from Parkinson's, filtered in from the other room. A little assistance, please? I squeezed Mom's hand reassuringly. Coming, Dad. I found him slumped on the couch, his medication bottle lying open and empty on the floor. Quickly, I gathered the scattered pills and fixed him a glass of water. I'm so sorry, I murmured, helping him swallow the drugs, keeping his tremors at bay. This move has been chaos. I'll stay on top of your prescriptions from now on, I promise. He patted my arm with a shaky hand. No need to apologize, kiddo. I know you're doing your best with, well, everything. A lump formed in my throat at the weary grace in his eyes. For over 20 years, I'd been the one caring for them as their conditions worsened, while Nathan went through get-rich-quick phases like clockwork. Now he'd left me holding the bag altogether, and not for the first time his timing was exquisitely selfish. Marla? Mom's anxious voice carried from the other room. Hello? I can't find my way. I forced back tears, squeezing Dad's hand before hurrying to Mom. Of course, she'd gotten turned around in the unfamiliar apartment. I'm here, Mom, I said gently, taking her arm to guide her. Let's get you settled, okay? Over the next few hours, I shuttled between caring for my parents' needs, ensuring their medications, making them comfortable, answering the same questions over and over as Alzheimer's stole Mom's short-term memory anew each time. By the time I finally collapsed into bed long after midnight, I was utterly spent. And yet, despite my exhaustion, Anger simmered within me at how easy Nathan had it now. While I juggled working full-time as a nurse to make ends meet, maintaining a home for our parents, and dealing with the emotional turmoil he'd caused, he was off reveling in his shiny new life with his pregnant mistress. Kira's youth and beauty were icing on the cake of his ego. My fists clenched at the thought of them together, blissfully fornicated, while I struggled under the weight of his selfishness. But I promised myself it wouldn't be that way for long. Soon I'd deploy the intel I'd gathered on Nathan's misdeeds. His duplicitous life would start unraveling, and every silk-sheeted morning with Kira would taste more and more like ashes in his mouth. No matter what it took, I would grind his new facade into dust. Nathan would learn there was a heavy price to pay for betraying me. The musty tang of old paperwork filled my nostrils as I pored over the financial records splayed across the dinette table. Printouts, post-it notes, and spreadsheets painted a damning portrait, one revealing the full depth of Nathan's deceit. In addition to bilking money from our joint accounts to fund his affair, he'd taken out massive loans against our assets and made a series of catastrophically bad investments. If his web of lies wasn't unraveled soon, there would be virtually nothing left for me and our parents. A harsh reminder tone from my phone made me start. I glanced at the time, cursing under my breath as I realized I was running critically late to pick up Dad from his physical therapy session. Shoving the paperwork aside, I grabbed my purse and car keys. Mom would be fine for a short while. Her daily routine of watching game shows and tending to her bird ensured she stayed occupied. But if I didn't retrieve Dad soon, his simmering resentment at having to rely on me would only intensify. The geriatric center's waiting room was deserted, except for Dad slumped in a vinyl chair, his body trembling slightly from the Parkinson's. His face was thunderous as I hurried over. "Nice of you to finally show up," he growled without looking at me. "In case you forgot, I'm not getting any younger here." I cringed inwardly at his harsh tone, but I deserved it. Between caring for Mom, my job at the hospital, and trying to salvage our finances, I constantly dropped the ball when it came to being present for him. "I'm so sorry, Dad," I said, grabbing his arm to help lever him upright. "It won't happen again." He grunted in acknowledgement but remained stone-faced, at least until his gnarled hand clamped over mine, his eyes softening as they met my gaze. "You've got a hell of a lot on your plate, kiddo, more than any one person should have to shoulder." I felt my throat tighten at his gruff sympathy, swallowing hard against the sting of tears. "I'm okay, really. We'll get through this." A tremor rippled through his frame as he squeezed my hand. "That no-good son of a bitch yanked the rug out from under you. But you listen to me, Marla. You are not alone in this fight, you hear?" Though his voice was weakened by age and illness, an undercurrent of determination flowed through his words. I was reminded of how Dad had provided for us through sheer grit after his factory job was outsourced, refusing to let misfortune shatter our family. Fierceness kindled within me, banishing the urge to buckle under the strain of Nathan's betrayal. Dad's strength was my blood, throbbing with righteous tenacity and the promise of vengeance. "You're right, Dad," I said, squaring my shoulders. "Nathan's not going to get away with any of this. I'm going to hit him from every angle until there's nothing left." The gleam in Dad's eyes mirrored the nascent fire inside me. "That's my girl. Now go get him and show that bastard exactly what he's messing with." I felt a withering clarity form around my fury as we slowly made our way to the car. No more would I merely react to the chaos Nathan had created. From now on, I would become the eye of the storm itself, plotting his total destruction with cold, meticulous precision. Every selfish decision, every sleazy misdeed of his would be weaponized, returning to haunt him tenfold. I would become the sword of karma itself, slicing through every delusion until he was left with nothing but the harsh reckoning he deserved. By the time I was done with Nathan Bennett, his supposed perfect new life with Kira would lie in ashes, and he would finally understand the overwhelming burn of consequences he never saw coming. "This is never how I envisioned my career going," Jackson said with a self-deprecating chuckle as he spread the divorce paperwork across his desk. The overhead light gleamed off his thick gray hair as he scanned the documents, helping take down lying bastards like your soon-to-be ex-husband. A wry smile tugged at the corners of my mouth. If someone had told me a year ago that I'd be working closely with a hotshot corporate lawyer to dismantle my marriage, I would have laughed in their face. Jackson's grizzled appearance and blunt manner masked an intelligence that could fillet you without breaking a sweat. He was exactly the kind of pit bull I needed in my corner. I can't thank you enough for this, Jackson. I leaned forward, keeping my voice low and intense. Nathan doesn't realize it yet, but he's wandered into a minefield, and I'm counting on you to ensure he doesn't make it out in one piece. Jackson's ice-blue eyes held my gaze with surprising warmth. You got it, kiddo. We'll hit that bastard from every angle. Financial malfeasance, alienation of assets, negligence towards your parents. By the time this is over, he'll be lucky if he can afford a cardboard box under an overpass. I nodded, satisfied by his grim certainty. But there was still one key element missing from my plan. Insight on Nathan's new lover and cohort in betrayal, Kiera. That was where Leah came in, her startling appearance at the cafe nearly making me choke on my coffee. Marla Bennett, right? The petite brunette slid into the seat across from me, her expression a blend of wariness and distaste. I'm Leah, Kiera's sister. My eyebrows shot up at this unexpected development. I didn't realize Kiera had any family in the area. Well, we're not exactly close, she said with a derisive snort. That etiquette-eschewing tramp hasn't spoken to me since she shacked up with your lying dirtbag husband. Leah's disdain was palpable, her hazel eyes blazing with disgust. Family drama clearly ran deep. Let me guess, I replied, leaning back in my chair to study her. You want to help take them down as much as I do. A feral grin carved itself across her delicate features as she nodded. You could say I have a vested interest in seeing that bastard get what's coming to him. Over the next hour, Leah regaled me with a litany of jaw-dropping details about Nathan and Kiera's sordid affair. Graphic sexual encounters in seedily locations, furtive payoffs to keep Kiera in a life of empty glamour as Nathan frittered away money behind my back, her callous indifference to the child she was carrying. With each new lurid revelation, my blood boiled hotter. Nathan's appalling lack of integrity was exceeded only by Kiera's sociopathic amorality. That's a lot to process. I finally managed once Leah's tirade wound down. While part of me felt sickened to my core, another part thrilled at the upswing in ammunition against them both. Leah arched one sculpted eyebrow, clearly sensing my restraint. You wanted the unvarnished truth about those two scumbags. I'm giving you a grenade to lob straight into the middle of their sordid fairy tale. The question is, do you have the balls to pull the pin and watch it all explode? I held her gaze, feeling an icy clarity form around my fury. This was my chance to strike at the dark heart of Nathan's hedonistic delusions. No more indecision or moral restraint. You're damn right I do, I said flatly. It's time to unmake those two once and for all. By the time I left the cafe, my steps were lighter than they'd been in weeks. Every carefully gathered thread was finally weaving together into an inescapable snare. Nathan would soon learn that betrayal cut both ways, and the bite of my retaliation would go straight to the bone. You can't be serious. Nathan's voice was low, dangerous, as he glared across the table at me. You're really going to drag my career into this? I met his stare with an icy calm, sliding the thick dossier towards him. Pages of meticulously compiled evidence detailing his financial improprieties and alienation of assets laid bare like a visual indictment. As you can see, I'm deadly serious. My tone carried no inflection, no waver. This is just the opening salvo, Nathan. I'll burn everything around you until there's nothing left. His jaw clenched, anger and disbelief warring across his features as he flipped through the damning pages. Good. Let him be enraged. Let him finally understand the sheer depths of my wrath. Where did you even get this? He sputtered, slamming the dossier down hard enough to rattle the silverware. Have you been having me followed or something? A humorless smirk tugged at the corner of my mouth. You're the one who insisted on turning our lives into a nightmare. Don't act so shocked that I'm simply fighting fire with fire. Comprehension slowly dawned in the tightness around his eyes as he processed my casual ruthlessness. At long last, Nathan could see the cold, implacable resolve driving me. Marla, his voice dropped, took on a vaguely placating tone that immediately raised my hackles. I get that you're angry, but maybe we should take a step back here, for both our sakes and the kids. Don't. My finger jabbed down on the table, cutting off his manipulative spin. Don't you dare try to play the family card with me after everything you've done. That ship sailed the second you knocked up your slut on the side. His nostrils flared, tendons standing out in stark relief in his neck. But he stayed silent, waiting for me to unleash the rest of my fury. Starting today, I declare war on you and your mistress's illusions of happiness, I said, each clipped word dripping with contempt. That cozy little bundle of lies you've constructed, I'm going to rip it apart piece by piece. I slid a manila envelope across the table towards him, the corners digging in gouges on the wood. Those are just a few samples of the images and informant testimonies I've gathered about you two lovebirds. Every sordid hookup, every nickel you blew on that trashy lifestyle while I struggled to keep our parents alive, it's all there in glorious detail. Nathan sucked in a sharp breath as he thumbed through a few of the photos, which clearly depicted him and Kira in varying states of debauchery. But his surprise quickly morphed into an all-too-familiar, smarmy bravado. Is that all you got? One corner of his mouth curled into a disdainful sneer. You think a few nudie pics and slut-shaming is going to intimidate me? I'm not the one on shaky financial ground here. My expression remained impassive, a porcelain mask belying the volcanic fury simmering within me. Slowly, deliberately, I leaned back in my chair and let my gaze sweep over every inch of the man who had once been my husband, my partner, my promised safety. By the time our divorce proceedings are over, you're going to be buried so deep in legal fees and financial ruin that you'll be begging for table scraps, I said, each word measured and certain. But money problems are just the start of your worries. Letting the weight of that statement hang in the air for a beat, I withdrew a sheaf of papers held together with a smudged paperclip. With glacial precision, I slid them over to punctuate my vow. Those contain eyewitness affidavits and documentation detailing the wanton neglect you've shown towards Mom and Dad's care. I'm sure a law enforcement investigation into potential elder abuse would make for some very inconvenient headlines at that firm of yours. For the first time since we'd started this little encounter, Nathan's bravado cracked. A flicker of uncertainty, of naked fear, danced in his widening eyes as he registered the full scope of my intentions. As the silence stretched out between us, I allowed myself a final verbal bayonet thrust. You wanted freedom from your responsibilities? Well, congratulations, Nathan. You're about to get your wish. And you're going to spend whatever's left of your miserable existence paying for it in ways you can't even imagine yet. The steady clicking of the court reporter's keys was the only sound in the tense, wood-paneled room as Judge Richards paged through the thick dossier before him. His stern features remained inscrutable, giving no hint as to how heavily the evidence was weighing against Nathan. Seated beside Jackson at the plaintiff's table, I kept my own expression neutral, focused. This was the endgame, the culmination of months spent meticulously undermining every aspect of Nathan's life. After today's ruling, nothing would be the same for him ever again. Mr. Bennett. The judge's gravelly voice sliced through the stillness like a blade. Nathan straightened in his chair, a sheen of sweat visible on his brow. Based on the extensive financial documentation and third-party testimony provided here, it's clear you have engaged in repeated and willful alienation of assets, Judge Richards stated, his tone flat and clinical. Money that should have gone towards ensuring the care of your elderly parents was funneled into irresponsible investments and a lifestyle incompatible with your obligations as a spouse. One of Nathan's lawyers made a move to stand, a retort forming on his lips, but the judge silenced him with an icy look. I haven't finished. He turned his glare fully onto Nathan. Would you care to explain why the court should consider your accounts and property claims as anything other than utterly compromised, Mr. Bennett? Because these materials paint a deeply unpalatable picture. Nathan swallowed hard, shifting in his seat as he struggled to meet the judge's withering stare. Your Honor, I made some mistakes in judgment, I'll admit, but my financial affairs have no bearing on how I handled my responsibilities towards my family. The words had barely left his mouth before Jackson was on his feet, angrily waving a sheaf of papers from our evidence trove. No bearing? He shook his head in disdain. After betraying his vows and squandering money on affairs, Bennett left his wife to single-handedly tend to his parents' declining health, one with Parkinson's, the other suffering from Alzheimer's. We have sworn affidavits and medical bills here showing incontrovertible neglect. Nathan tried to interject, but the torrent of Jackson's words drowned him out. This man forfeited his right to any consideration long ago, Your Honor. Jackson thundered, fury thrumming in his voice. He does not deserve a single dime from these proceedings. I watched, feeling an electric crackle of vindication spark along my nerves, as Nathan fought to regain his composure under the weight of Jackson's assault. His jaw clenched, that familiar, entitled mask slipping back into place, but his eyes betrayed flickers of desperation. The judge's voice cut through the tension, a well-timed incision lancing the roiling anger in the room. I've heard enough. Piercing both legal teams with a quelling look, he squared his shoulders and began delivering his ruling in a tone of finality. Based on the extensive evidence of asset mismanagement and negligent conduct exhibited by Mr. Nathan Bennett, I am awarding the plaintiff, Mrs. Marla Bennett, with sole rights and ownership over the marital home and its assets. Furthermore, Mr. Bennett must provide spousal support and funds for the ongoing care of his elderly parents. Nathan's face had drained of all color as Judge Richards enumerated the punitive list, the legal and financial pillars of his life, crumbling in accordance with my carefully executed plan. I felt a surge of fierce elation, watching him come face to face with the consequences of his selfishness. Mr. Bennett will be granted no share of liquid assets, investments, or property division in these proceedings. Nor will he maintain any claims over future inheritance entitlements, which shall be immediately frozen pending an investigation into potential criminal culpability regarding elder abuse and misappropriation. In that moment, I could have sworn I heard the crystal shattering of every illusion Nathan had surrounded himself with. As scattered protests erupted around him, I simply held his stricken gaze with mine. Unflinching, resolute. This was what the cruelty of his betrayal had wrought. This was the karma he'd brought upon himself through his own disregard. Across the room, our eyes locked in an apex of anguish and triumph. And in that suspended instant, we both fully understood. Nathan Bennett's reckoning had finally and utterly arrived. The sleek metal briefcase made a satisfying thunk as I dropped it onto Nathan's boss's desk. McDermott, a jowly, perpetually frowning man, raised an inquisitive eyebrow at me. I think you'll want to review the contents of that very carefully, I said, keeping my tone brisk and businesslike despite the vindictive thrill uncurling inside me. It contains comprehensive evidence of unethical conduct by one of your senior employees. McDermott's frown deepened, but he made no move to open the briefcase. I don't have time for games, Mrs. Bennett. What is this about? Rather than answer directly, I pulled out my phone and thumbed over to the gallery, pulling up the sheaf of damning financial records and lurid photos. Does your company have any policies regarding misappropriation of funds? I asked, turning the screen to show McDermott the first few images, ones clearly depicting Nathan cavorting with his mistress during company hours, or rules about employees operating side businesses and investment schemes using company resources. McDermott's beefy face turned an alarming shade of puce as he rapidly cycled through the pictures and documents. When he finally looked up at me again, tendons stood out in thick cords on his neck. Where did you get these? His gravelly voice was a mix of fury and unease. I allowed myself a razor-thin smile. I have sources. But more importantly, I have proof that Nathan Bennett has been grossly abusing his position at this firm to enable his infidelity and shady personal dealings. Planting my palms on McDermott's desk, I leaned forward to catch and hold his gaze. He's a liability, one that could jeopardize your entire company's standing if this information got into the wrong hands. But I'm giving you the chance to handle this in-house, so to speak. McDermott's jaw clenched hard as he processed my none-too-subtle threat. I watched the realization wash over him that I had him precisely where I wanted. When he finally spoke, his tone was as cold and hard as the briefcase between us. Consider it handled. That son of a bitch is through here the second I can push the paperwork. I allowed myself a thin, satisfied smile, pushing back from the desk. Pleasure doing business with you. As I strode down the corridors towards the exit, I could feel the knot of anger that had driven me for so long finally beginning to uncoil. The wheels of Nathan's undoing had well and truly been set in motion. By the time I made it home, a voicemail was already waiting for me. I felt a surge of vicious triumph as Nathan's voice, strained and desperate, issued from the speaker. Marla, please, you have to call me back. I don't know what you think you're doing, but I just got terminated from my job. They're accusing me of misusing funds and corporate resources for my own gain. This is insane. You've gone way too far with this vendetta. If we can just sit down and talk. I rolled my eyes in disgust, hitting the delete button to purge his plea from existence. Nathan's spectacular downward spiral was too little, too late, which was hammered home a few hours later by the shrill ring of my doorbell. I swung the door open to find a panicked, red-eyed Kira on my front step. You, she spat, her voice shaking with rage and confusion. What did you do? Nathan's life is in ruins. The money's gone, his career is destroyed, his reputation shredded, and now he says he can't even support me and my baby? I drank in Kira's unraveling with undisguised relish. Let her feel the sting of her own selfishness, the bitter consequences of her choices. Let her see the paradise she'd tried to create atop Nathan's lies, withering away to bitter ash. Did you really think it would all just work out? My tone dripped with disdain. That Nathan would be able to walk away from the damage he caused, start over with a clean slate? Hurt and bewilderment flashed across Kira's features as the reality sank in. I had well and truly dismantled any future she'd envisioned with Nathan. A detached part of me felt a stab of pity for her. She was, after all, just a foolish pawn who'd bought into his con. But she'd made her bed with Nathan, and now they could lie in the smoldering ruins together. This is the bed you two made, I said, cold finality in my voice. I hope you're comfortable in it. With that, I stepped back and closed the door in her face, shutting out her gasped protests. There would be no more discussion, no compromise. I'd executed my revenge with perfect precision. And Nathan's world was left burning because of it. 6 months later, I stood in the doorway of the bedroom, watching as Mom fussed absent-mindedly with Dad's blankets. Her mind might have been fading, but her nurturing instincts remained. There you go, dear, she cooed, patting Dad's hand with a tremulous smile, all comfy. Dad's eyes crinkled at the corners as he returned her smile. Though the Parkinson's had continued its inexorable progression, he seemed content, peaceful even. They both did. Seeing them together, safe and cared for in the home I had fought so viciously to keep, I felt something inside me finally unclench. The white-hot anger that had propelled me for so long dimmed, replaced by a sense of closure. Everything okay in here? I made my presence known, moving to sit on the edge of Dad's bed. Dad's roomy eyes found mine, their depths still bright with the core of steel I remembered from my childhood. More than okay, kiddo. Your old man's living the dream in this swanky assisted living setup you got us. I ducked my head, suddenly bashful under the gruff affection in his tone. It's the least I could do to make up for everything you two went through. Don't sell yourself short, Marla. His gnarled hand found mine, squeezing with surprising strength. You went through hell and came out swinging harder than anyone could have expected. We're proud of you, kiddo. Proud as hell. My throat grew thick with emotion at his simple sincerity. So much bitterness and betrayal, and I emerged tempered, not broken. Squaring my shoulders, I squeezed Dad's hand in return. I did what I had to, I said, keeping my voice level, to protect our family and settle some scores in the process. Mom, bless her innocent heart, piped up obliviously. Such a good girl, our Marla. Why, when we heard that Nathan ran off with that other woman, we could barely believe it. Poor thing must have been going through some sort of crisis to do something so foolish. A wry chuckle slipped from me at her cheerfully revisionist perspective on the events that had sundered our lives. Maybe it was for the best she remained unaware of the uglier realities. Something like that, Mom, I said, ruffling her sweetly bemused expression with a smile of my own. My gaze strayed to the framed photos clustered on Dad's nightstand, sick guilt and vindication warring within me. In one, Nathan and I beamed out at happier, more naive versions of ourselves. Another showed our tiny family unit radiant at Mom and Dad's 50th wedding anniversary, so ensconced in our illusion of forever. And then there was the final photo. Just me and my parents. The strained smiles and body language speaking to the turmoil that had nearly torn us apart. But we'd emerged from the crucible, somehow still together, with a bottomless wellspring of tenacity to show for it. My phone buzzed in my pocket, the caller ID displaying Jackson's number. I rejected the call. Whatever legal semblance of business still lingered between us could wait. Standing, I leaned down and pressed a gentle kiss to Dad's forehead, then Mom's, letting the reality of our renewed stability settle over me. Countless nights of agony and rage had been endured, all towards crafting this hard-won victor. "I'm going to run some errands," I murmured. "I'll check on you two later, okay?" Dad rumbled an affirmative as I slipped from the room. Out in the hallway, I paused, bracing my hands on the walls as I drew in a deep cleansing breath. The clinic didn't need me for a few hours. Ample time to stop by the community garden and tend to my little plot of hard-won rebirth. My own personal oasis of new beginnings fostered from the scorched earth of betrayal. One way or another, every crisis ushered in the chance to start anew. And as I squared my shoulders and strode towards the exit, I silently celebrated leaving the ashes of the past behind me. No matter what the future held, I would emerge from the flames again, resilient, proud, and unstoppable.